MMA Rants and Raves, Strikeforce, Dan Henderson versus Babalu Sobral 2. Guys, let's talk about this fight. Basically what you have here, these guys are trying to stand up with each other, despite the fact that they're both also very good ground fighters. You have Dan Henderson, legendary wrestler, Babalu Sobral, the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt. So despite that, they were trying to stand up with each other, trying to get inside. You see Sobral throwing a leg kick, and then as these fighters started to get closer, you just saw Sobral throwing a left hand, seemed to go right over Dan Henderson. Henderson seemed to duck under it, and then he got inside. Dan Henderson pushing the pace, throwing punches. Sobral drops, grabs onto Henderson's leg, and this was really interesting because, of course it could be a clinch because of the fact that it looked like Sobral got hurt there. And you have a guy who's a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt, but you have Henderson. The point I want to make is he's such a good wrestler because he had that leg. You see Henderson spinning towards the direction he was trying to twist it. And that just goes to show, because a lot about wrestling is balance. You have to have balance. And it just seems he knows where to move. He sees where his opponent is moving him. So he goes towards that direction, or maybe against that direction. If you can see, he can reverse it. I mean, so talented Dan Henderson is in the wrestling department. So, basically, instead of tripping or falling and being in a dangerous position, especially against a BJJ black belt, he's the guy who ends up on top and basically, trying to get to a position to get an advantage while he's on top of Sobral. You see Sobral basically trying to clinch, to hold on, maybe look for a submission or something. And Henderson basically broke that clinch. He did it so well, created a gap. He's trying to push Sobral away to give himself leeway to release those dangerous hands. And that's all he needed to do. So aggressive, such a finisher Dan Henderson is. He saw the opportunity and started the grounding and pounding, throwing punches, and the defeat was total. It was a knockout, knocked Sobral out, and very impressive. A few points I want to make, and that's about Dan Henderson. A lot of talk was, fighters can get old in a year and stuff like that. I don't know who made up that phrase, but I think it's ridiculous. And another point I want to make about Dan Henderson, he's one of these guys that's so experienced. He's one of those guys that can come back despite everything. He can have an extremely dominant victory, then he can have a devastating defeat, but then he can come back and still have another dominating victory. That's the type of guy he is. And with fighters out there, sometimes if they suffer a really bad loss, it can be devastating to their career, and they can just seem to never come back. But here's a guy, he can lose a fight, but he can come back. And that's the type of fighter he is. And what gives you that is experience. He's been in this game a long time, so he knows what he has to do to win a fight. The last fight was really tough on him, and now look what happens. Just a total defeat. Very impressed with this victory. And I just wanted to comment, all the other fights were just amazing. Strikeforce, I got to tip my hat to them. Really, really good night of fights. If you're a boxing fan, I'm not going to give you any spoilers if you haven't seen this card, but I highly recommend you watch this card. I can't remember so many knockouts in just one night. Knockout after knockout. So in some of these fights, it just seemed more like boxing than it was mixed martial arts. So if you like knockouts, check this card out, including this fight, which was really good. Great night of fights. So I'd like to know, especially what you thought about the main event, Henderson versus Sobral, and all the other fights on the Strikeforce card. Please leave your comments below the video, rate this video, and subscribe, and thank you for tuning in.